I'm here with Dr. Sharon Fieldstone, and she's here to talk about her new
Ted Lasso video.
I'd like to start with a phrase that you return to several times in your book. Lose the
Ted Lasso video.
Lose the
Ted Lasso video. Ted Lasso Season 4, Episode 4 is here, and it's another strong episode. This season continues to be going very well. Okay, if I'm honest, I do have problems here. More problems than I have done with the last 2 episodes. I don't think I felt as invested in this one. And we're going to discuss that at some length, but this is also still very fun, and it does something that I think could be brilliant. Could be the best thing so far this season. It quietly sets up something very interesting in the background. I am really excited to see if that pays off, and if you're interested to know what the hell I'm talking about, then stick around and watch this cool train. So we're going to start with my negatives, I suppose. They're not fully negative, but I was really excited when I realised what this episode was going to be. It's a chance to actually spend time with the squad, with the people. It's the thing I've kept saying every episode. I want to get to know this team. I want to know what the players are like, the way we previously had all sorts going on with Jamie or Colin or Isaac or Sam or Rory. We don't know a great deal about this squad. For example, I'm not even sure who the captain is now. I suspect it has been mentioned and I've missed it or forgotten, but the fact that kind of thing isn't obvious says a lot about the lack of exploration around the squad dynamics. I guess I'd say it's Boots. At some point, I imagine it could be Lizzie. She could grow into that. There could be an interesting conflict this season around Lizzie, who is very comfortable with playing a leadership role, but may not be fully accepted by the others because she hasn't come into the sport professionally. She was found on a trial. I don't know. I'd like to see more about her son coming in and how that affects things again. Last episode, Alice seemed very against her son being present at all at training, where Coach Beards didn't mind. I don't think as a team of 3, the staff have actually found their feet and found a proper dynamic yet as well. That's something interesting to explore more. And yeah, I think that's part of the reason we haven't had much exploration around the squad dynamics before, because Ted doesn't know much himself. He's not allowed in the changing room until probably quite a while after, enough time for everyone to voice their immediate reactions to the game, drink, shower, then dress. By that point, he's already missed a lot and feels a bit out of the loop. Alice, you imagine, could be able to feed back a lot of the information to him there, but that's not her area of strength when it comes to management, understanding the squad dynamics and the players as people. So what's happened is cliques have developed. Seems a little simplistic for it to just be split into defenders, midfielders and attackers, especially when like fullbacks and wingers will spend more time complementing each other on the pitch than most other positions. And also imagine a team where all of your attackers are really selfish. What's wrong, Bill Lawrence? Have you never heard of Dirk Kuyt? Do you know of the Space Invader?
Or Interpreter. It's very cool, actually.
God, a few minutes in and I'm already getting pedantic and dumb. This would be a stupid thing to take issue with. I'm playing around, but there are cliques. I'm glad to have something going on in the squads, and this is the simplest, more accessible way to present it. My issue is just we're still not really learning anything about them, are we? The squad is used simply for the metaphor here, rather than explored as an intricate mix of human beings. I don't end this episode knowing Gemma any better than I did before. Boots doesn't drink, I suppose, there's that. Neve loves the movie Parent Trap, which feels very on brand and doesn't really grow her out of the kind of the twin stereotype. Paris knows a lot about Russian literature, but I'm not really sure who Paris is. I mentioned Lizzie, but also where's Shannon in all of this? She's someone who neither Beards nor Alice thought was good enough, who I would assume could have massive imposter syndrome at being here. I want to know both how Shannon's doing and also how she's feeling. If she's accepted by the others, does she seem worse than them? What's the dynamic there? Not just because it interests me, not just because I talked a ton last episode about how brilliantly she works as a metaphor for a lot of things in this show, but also because it feels important as part of understanding the team dynamics. I'm confused how missing she feels here. So this much about the episodes does disappoint me. It's an episode about team bonding, but I don't feel like I'm really getting to bond with the team. I'm not worried going ahead. I'm quite confident these things will come up in later episodes at some point, but I do think it makes this episode specifically a bit underwhelming. What other negatives did I have? I'm slightly underwhelmed by the Keeley-Roy plotline this episode. I feel like they've both been a lot more mature than this in past seasons. I feel like Roy deserves honest answers from Keeley on how she's feeling rather than her just making him run an errand to maybe date him again. It still doesn't make Keeley's feelings at all clear to Roy, other than that she's sort of minimizing how Roy feels, arguably, here. I don't know, maybe it's me, but if someone said we can't date at the moment because you need to go and date other people first, I would just say, right, well, I'm not coming back then. If the possibility of relationship requires all sorts of caveats, then it's probably not the right relationship. I don't know if that's the direction they're going. To me, it just feels a bit manufactured to give Roy some fun stuff to do this episode. But at the same time, to be fair, it is fun. It's perhaps the most I've enjoyed Roy as a character this season, the sort of bizarre contradiction that he's being a total dick to a lot of women, but also doing it in a very graceful and empathetic way. He's honest, he apologizes, he expects and accepts them being angry with him. I don't know, even when he's using people, he's doing it in a mostly mature manner. That's kind of just a fun idea. It makes for some quite good comedy, and the fact you see him slowly becoming more curious and more drawn in, first by the waitress and then Dr. Beaumont challenging him. I have no idea what his plotline is going. If the point is Keeley is going to be right for Roy, or if he needs to move on, or if this is temporary or whatever, but it is fun this episode. I do enjoy that. And I would like to explore it a little bit more as well, because I whilst Roy is being a dick to these women doing that, Keeley also told him to. Keeley is fully on board with his plan of dating 10 random women in order to then come back to her. I feel like she's just as bad as him here, and I feel like they're both better than this as people. Anyway, there are cliques that Ted breaks down by taking them to a pub quiz. I also enjoy that as a joke, actually, that he's cancelling practice as a punishment, and they're all mad that they have to go to the pub instead. God. There's a lot of talk about the way to unite a team is by giving them a common enemy. And the common enemy we then see this episode is, of course, these dickheads at the pub. When the team as a whole gets criticised for who they are, then they form ranks and unite, and quite literally fight to defend each other, which I suppose is what you want in a team. When one person gets hurt, that the others are ready to raise fists on their behalf. And it probably is quite a good way to bond, all ending up in a holding cell together for the night. That does make for a good shared story, I would imagine. It is, of course, very lucky they can just get bailed out by someone capable of abusing police corruption, and I imagine this will still have consequences going ahead. I don't imagine this is fully resolved, but it is quite a fun moment for now, and it does make for a nice little snapshot of a fun, mad night out. So again, I do enjoy this, but at the same time, I can't help finding this a bit blunt. A group of lads who very conveniently are there to mock women's football and really want to rub it in their faces. There's a certain irony in that they think women's football is ridiculous and yet also know who these players are. I don't know if that's deliberate or not. And don't get me wrong, I 100% believe this happens. I've seen similar occurrences enough times myself. I've gone and watched a lot of football in a lot of pubs and talked to other random strangers during those games. But I've been around enough football fans to know this absolutely still happens. The stigma against women's football isn't as strong as it once was, but people like this still exist and are still a problem. However, it is very one-dimensional here. They're just saying all the right things to conveniently make themselves the enemy right when an enemy is needed. And also, come on, this is a British pub. Where's your etiquette? This is a place for all of the community, especially during a pub quiz. Old blokes, families with kids. If you're going to be rowdy in a classic pub, you go into the pub garden or you go into the street. You don't ruin everyone's evening, especially when there's a pub quiz going on, and I feel like the whole pub should have taken issue with that. No, I'm getting pedantic again, aren't I? Why do I keep getting so pedantic today? Is this all I have to criticise? It's not fair of me. I mean, I suppose it's just because I know already from the comments how many people are losing their minds about this show supposedly becoming woke and preachy this season, which I completely disagree with, by the way. I keep asking the commenters what exactly they think it's preaching, and only one of them had the grace and the honesty to reply, which big props to them for that, but they suggested this show is preaching the message that all men are horrible, misogynistic, terrible people, which, I mean, seems a weird thing for a show about Ted Lasso to be preaching. Ted Lasso, the guy who's, well, Ted Lasso. Also, there's a lot of other men here who are clearly very supportive of women's football and of the women in their lives. You know, in my opinion, this show is definitely not arguing men are bad, but is also obviously going to explore sexism, because a lot of sexism does surround women's football. That's just a fact they have to engage with. In the same way a lot of toxic masculinity and homophobia surrounded men's sport, for which we got plot lines about that. You know, we got Jamie Tart being a dickhead and a bully, we got Roy being overly macho and violent to begin with, we got Jamie's dad. I mean, if there's ever any argument in Ted Lasso that men are apparently horrible, Jamie's dad is surely the first example you'd point to. Also Rupert Mannion. Except obviously those characters feel incredibly real, and that's obviously not what the show is trying to suggest with their characterization, so why would we assume anything else here? It also did have the 3 dickhead male fans who were constantly shouting abuse at Ted before, a more light-hearted example of the hooliganism in the men's game. But those 3 gradually grew to be quite nice comedic characters. And who they were originally, I think, feels like exactly what this group of lads are now. It's the same kind of setup and you can sense the same outcome. This show is even smart enough to pepper in some vulnerability to them now.
Well, I'm Irish Catholic with 40 nieces and nephews, all below the age of 7.
And I'm an assistant librarian.
And I'm learning to read again after a serious head pineapple.
He means how'd you enjoy?
I also like their smiling reaction after Ted suggests they come and watch a match and Coach Beard taunts them.
Watch our gals beat someone else's ass.
When do you think we can start having sex with each other in here?
An unexpected line of dialogue, to be sure, but again, undermining the overly laddish first impression we were given. I'm willing to bet this season is going to end with these guys not just being won around by the women's team, but also just slowly revealing more and more of them to highlight the complete reverse of what people are arguing, that men aren't terrible and aren't being painted as terrible. That in fact, even the men who can appear the most sexist, can say the most sexist things, aren't all entirely bad, can still be quite nice people underneath, can have the sense to grow and change. I mean, maybe I'm being a bit generous because this guy does pour a pint on Gemma's head simply because he thinks she's cheated, but do we really imagine this season is going to end by shaming these men for just being downright awful, by shaming the slightly straw men fans from the last episode? The show, predominantly written and produced by Bill Lawrence, Brendan Hunt and Brett Goldstein, apparently hates men now? You know, exploring sexism against women doesn't inherently make this misandrist unless you argue misogyny in sports doesn't exist and shouldn't be explored and that it's one or the other. I don't think that's the case. So, I can't believe how long I'm spending discussing this. This should be quite clear. You know, what was my point though? Does this mean I'm criticizing the show for being too heavy-handed in here? I suppose in a way. I think it invites easy criticism, which is a shame because I want people to take this show seriously, and I hate how easily people get duped into just writing off everything as woke all the time. But equally, I've always felt critical about Ted Lasso for being too heavy-handed with most things, to be honest. I've said that in the past. A lot of you haven't liked me saying that about this show, but I think it often is quite heavy-handed. It's always very earnest and sincere in how it does that, so I never really mind that much. But the Sam or the Colin episodes in Season 3 were very heavy-handed. Some of the moments surrounding Ted in Season 2 even were. In fact, if you're talking about a heavy-handed approach to sexism, probably the clearest example is from the very first moment of Season 1 with George... I was going to say George Carlin, not him. I've forgotten the coach's name.
Hey, boy.
Did you do it yourself or get some puff to help you? Right, love. Listen, I've got training in a minute, so whatever it is you need to get off your impressive chest, let me have it.
Your casual misogyny, for one. I know, it's a big word. Ask one of your daughters what it means.
Is anyone taking issue with that here? No? Good. I think if you're on the lookout for signs of what you've decided is woke and political, then even the faintest whiff is going to appear too heavy-handed. I don't think that's really what their criticism is about here, and I think people would inevitably criticise it for being that, regardless of how deftly it handled the subject. And in that sense, I would much rather it tried to explore those themes properly than to shy away from them out of fear of the internet being the internet. However, the simplicity of the conflict between these men and the team, I think, does deny us space to get to know more about the intricacies of this squad. But we've got that out of the way now, so let's discuss the thing I really wanted to discuss.
Question 1. What is the world?
Anvil. Discount with the code TREE. World Anvil! Yep, they are sponsoring this video. World Anvil is an online tool for game masters, for writers, for tabletop RPG players and world builders. An online tool for designing worlds, creating characters, chronicling history, planning and managing campaigns from a plethora of different games. My best friend uses it for our D&D campaign, I use it for planning my novel. Far better and easier than the scraps of random A4 paper stuffed into a drawer that used to constitute my creative process. Not only can I keep everything in one place where I can easily edit anything I want to, but I can create timelines, hyperlinks branching off to specific characters or articles, family trees, a billion other things. You can even link them all to maps, like here's this basic map I made years ago. If I click on the character Tess, it sends me straight to her page where everything is redacted, and that's like the most basic thing you can do with your maps. There's other creators whose world building looks so much nicer than mine. There's a whole community network on World Anvil if that's your thing. There's so many different cool features for everything you may possibly need. In general, there's been lots of great updates recently, making the interface even simpler and smoother than it already was. World Anvil is great. I am genuinely passionate. I hope you can hear that. And if you desire, if you crave, if you call to the heavens for a 51% discount, then use the code TREE, or click the link in the description or the pinned comment. And if you just want to try out the free version, then go for it. There's no time limit. Test it out for as long as you want. World Anvil. Okay, I suppose this kind of runs on from the last point, because another character I suspect people will point to as an example of this show being preachy and woke is Zelda Southport, because she gives a speech where she mentions the word patriarchy and she shits on most of the men in the room for caring much less about women's football than about their own profit and their own PR, supporting women's football as an act of tokenism. And this is, of course, a good point. It's often true in men's football as well. I don't believe for a second Jeff Bezos gives a damn about my club. Bill Shankly would have hated seeing this man buy a large stake in Liverpool, but there are also a lot of owners and investors who are genuine fans who grew up watching their club in the men's game. Women's football hasn't been around long enough for there to be many rich investors who grew up passionate about it, and we know hijacking a cause for personal PR is a genuine issue. In the past, there have even been lots of instances of owners buying clubs just to sell off their assets for the sake of profit and completely run the club into the ground. I don't think that's going to be explored here, but that too can be fit under the general umbrella of this issue. Zelda is correct, and Keeley is immediately smitten as a result, and also this is exactly the kind of person Richmond needs to survive, a solid investor who can provide contacts and a bit of a template for how this is done, but I don't think we're meant to take Zelda or her speech at face value. This guy Hugo may indeed be corrupt, but there's an obvious level of meanness to what Zelda's saying. The key thing here is Rebecca's reluctance. She is hesitant to work with Zelda, who appears to just get involved regardless of invitation. She's just the size of her own back to help when the team get arrested, and then Rebecca only accepts it because she wants Keeley to feel supported. She wants to trust Keeley's judgment on this. But if that doesn't hint there are going to be problems down the line, I don't know what does. Her support can definitely help grow the club, and she might genuinely be passionate about the support, but that doesn't mean her influence will always be good. Do you want to sell a stake to someone potentially very volatile? The key words this episode hints is anger. Rebecca describes Zelda as an angry rich woman.
I've spent far too much time with rich, angry women. I mean, I used to be one.
Zelda talks about anger being a fuel you can use.
Never underestimate the power of anger as fuel.
Which I actually made a Ted Lasso video all about once. Anger can absolutely be a positive force. Absolutely that can help when you've got a massive fight on your hands, like I think Rebecca and Keeley will, but at the same time, Zelda is very angry at these men we barely know who are at least doing something to support the sport, whatever their motivations. And whilst it is a big shame it does rely so heavily on them at the moment, I don't think the solution to that is to just attack them, and I think Rebecca fears that too. Is Zelda angry at them specifically for this, or is she angry for what they represent to her, or is this tied up in feelings surrounding her ex-husband? I don't know, it's a wild stab in the dark, but I wonder if Rebecca is fearful the Richmond women's team might become a tool within some internal war Zelda is waging. She might care about football and not be a suit-wearing tokenistic investor, but that doesn't mean she won't use Richmond, which above all is a piece of the community. For example, is she another Rupert Mannion? Rebecca once upon a time was almost becoming Rupert, but had a whole arc around rediscovering her own identity, free of him again, as she says this episode.
We don't need to be defined by our exes.
Don't mind being defined by mine.
Anger can absolutely be a fuel for something very important and very positive, but sometimes that can also be the justification used for something destructive. This episode ends with the whole team getting arrested for violence, let's not forget, and within this episode that's largely framed as something fun and positive. Because it brings the team together, right now it does feel wonderful, but anger often does feel wonderful when you let it out like that, doesn't it? It can still mean consequences will come back to bite you. I can't help wondering if Zelda is going to represent the person Rebecca could have turned into. I also can't help remembering the episode when Richmond men's played West Ham, and because Roy and Beard showed them the footage of Nate ripping up the sign, they went onto the pitch fuming and all got red cards, and I wonder if something kind of similar might happen here against Chelsea next episode, or maybe down the line, or maybe potentially beyond just a football pitch. I can't help wonder if what this show is setting up is an exploration of how detrimental it can be to the problems of sexism, especially systemic issues, to just turn mad against men altogether, to let the anger go too far, to, ironically, do the very thing these commenters are criticising it for preaching, and I think that could actually be brilliant. I mean, it's not my place to explain misogyny or what it feels like or how it's resolved, I don't know. I think calling it out absolutely matters, and pushing back when people dismiss criticisms as just preaching absolutely matters. But I don't think bottling people in the face is the solution, and I think it's that kind of approach to fighting for the women's game that Rebecca is hesitant about. To an extent, you definitely need fight, but Zelda may represent a step too far, especially if you really want to challenge the systemic issues. And the idea we're going to see things go too far only to have to pull back afterwards, yeah, I really enjoy the irony of exploring the very thing people are criticising the show for apparently doing. I think that's the best way to shut them up. I talked last video about how wonderful it is to be building a team largely from the ground up, but this is also its vulnerability. Scaling it up from very small opens you up to potentially having people take advantage. Men or women, whether they care about the sport or not, that can definitely be a problem. Anyway, I found this to be a very fun episode. Not captivating in the way the last two have been, and it's not really giving us the insight into the players I was hoping for, but it does feel like a very solid setup episode, and I'm excited to see where it goes next. Oh, and by the way, for those of you who are interested in this kind of thing, it makes sense the team would be happy to play Chelsea in the FA Cup, because playing a big team means a big set of fans that, for one, brings in massive ticket revenue when it's a home game for Richmond, also when Chelsea are also a London club, so it's going to be a lot easier for a lot of fans to get there. Equally means it's likely to be televised, so even more income from TV. But obviously it means these players get to meet some of the best in the sport and get to see themselves on TV. That's obviously exciting. Keeley hinted about packing out Nelson Road, which is of course the men's team stadium, and I think it suggests, like sometimes happens with other women's teams, that they get to play some of their cup matches in the men's stadium. And the potential of packing out a full stadium for a women's football game is exactly the big chance Keeley needs to A, grow interest in the team, but B, prove women's football can work just as well. So that's a good setup too. I'm sure everything will go perfectly without any problems whatsoever. Let me know what you think of this episode. Comment your thoughts, good or bad, on my video as well. Like this video if you liked it. Subscribe. Press the hype button. I've no idea what the hype button does, but you should probably press it to find out. Maybe support me on Patreon or buy me a coffee, but otherwise, hopefully see you next time. And as ever, a special thank you goes to Flying Spider, Luke Hoare, Michael Gallagher, Bemery, Faithy, TQM, Kinesthetic, Maury, Sebastian, Alicia, Chad Bramwell, Joshua C. Follier, Ali Sargent, and Alana Massey. Thank you.